So today we're going to start you off with a few quick questions, which you can answer by simply raising your hand. How many of you own a bike? Okay, how many of you ride it on campus? And how many of you get annoyed by parking on campus? Okay. Hi, I'm Michael.
And I'm Casey.
And today we'll be telling you about bike parking on campus.
So many of us, as we saw, do actually ride bikes on campus, and this is considered a fairly bike-friendly community, city as a whole. And we plan to address some of the parking issues that we have with bicycles on campus, and a few of the solutions that we can implement to resolve these issues.
We also plan to address the issue of illegal parking and inadequate parking in certain areas, and then provide solutions.
Alright, so I'm going to start us off. First of all, there are many places on campus that you can park your bike, and you may have noticed that some of these parking spots are actually very different from each other. Different styles of parking lots, or different styles of racks. And I've had several times with my bicycle, I've tried to park it, and I just get another bicycle parked over mine, or there's just not enough space, or it's hard to get it out. And sometimes a parking spot, it's like the one on the end, and it's not usable. You can't attach your bike to it in any way, and it's just a hassle. And kind of an example of this is over at Microbial Sciences building. There's a parking corral, and a lot of times there's bicycles that are just double parked there all the time, and people, I can see them all the time just trying to get their bicycle out, and they just can't do it. So just kind of an overview, to be clear, the City of Madison has a bicycle coordinator, but that coordinator is separate from the University of Wisconsin-Madison's Transportation Services bicycle coordinator. And we spoke with both of them, and we learned that the campus has two different styles of approved bicycle racks. And these are the duckbill rack and the inverted U-style rack. Now, the City of Madison, on the other hand, supports any style of bike rack that you can lock both the frame and the tire to the rack. So I'm going to talk about each of these and what's the problem with them. First of all, we have the inverted U-style rack. It's just a simple one that you come in. You can park your bike on one side or the other. But the thing is that sometimes people take up a whole space, or they just park right on the very end. And then there's just trouble with people that are trying to walk by this. It's a huge issue a lot of times. Other times people are like parking 3 or 4 on the thing. There's just no real consistent way to park your bicycle next to it. The other style is what's called the duckbill rack. Many of you have probably seen these. There's quite a few outside of mechanical engineering right out here. Basically, you bring your bike in, and you just lock the frame to it right here, and just like that. You just park your bike and you lock it in. The issue with this, there's not a whole lot of issues with actually finding space, but a lot of times this bicycle rack is actually damaged. You've probably seen it, especially during winter when people are plowing. They just mash up the end ones and they're no longer usable. The nice thing about this rack as well is that you can park a lot more in the same space as compared to the inverted U-style racks. Now, along with the design, there's also issues with where we actually have bicycle parking. In several areas, like I said, these racks can get in the way of pedestrian traffic, and especially when we're trying to get to class, this can be an issue. And sometimes there's just simply not enough parking, which prevents people from parking legally, and so they end up attaching to trees or rails or anything like that. For instance, outside of Agriculture Hall or Agriculture Engineering, there's a lot of issues with people just parking next to the rail because there's no parking areas within like 50 to 100 feet of the door. There's also another set of racks that's along Babcock, right off of University. So when you're turning off, you can keep on going on Babcock. There's a bunch of racks that are on the sidewalks, and those just get in the way. A lot of these are just an inconvenience to everyone, and if you don't have the bicycle parking space, you have to just park your bike legally. One of the biggest issues is along University. You all know where the brown rails are on University, right next to the sidewalk. A lot of people lock their bikes to those, which is actually very illegal, and they threaten to cut the locks daily. But the thing is that people just don't want to go far to park their bicycle. Now I'm going to hand it over to Michael so that he can talk about these other resolutions.
So the first thing we'd like to see changed is uniformity. As Casey talked about, there are a few different styles that are prevalent, but there are also other styles which are less common and therefore harder to use. So it would be nice to see the university choose a single, simple design going forward. And although people prefer different types of rack to park their bike on, choosing one style would make it much easier for everyone and save time. With standardizing bike racks, we'd also ensure plenty of room for individual bikes. As far as the two different styles we have up here, the inverted U takes up, each rack takes up much more space as opposed to many duckbill racks in rows. And there would also be a more standard space between each row, so that would lead to easier snow removal for grounds crew, and so that would be more standard. We would like to see the duckbill rack become the standard on campus. However, we'd also like to see it revised so that it's more durable and resistant to bending, so when, for instance, snow is being removed, it doesn't get damaged as easily. Second, we'd like to see improper parking more actively enforced. So in Madison, it's already required that your bike be registered with the city, if it's not already registered with another municipality. And so we believe that illegally parked bikes should be impounded more actively, because it's no different than impounding a car that was parked, say, in a handicap parking spot or right in front of a building where it's on the street. And with that, registration would ensure that you would get your bike back, because that, I mean, it ties you with your bike and it's easy. However, on or near bike racks, there should also be posted directions and pictures on how to park your bike on this specific rack. And so that would make parking much easier for all bikers as far as knowing how to park, and it would save time. A few other ways to make parking easier on campus would be, first, to add it where it's needed. As Casey said before, parking in Henry Mall, which is the area in front of Agricultural Hall, there's practically none, so people have been parking illegally. And so it just makes sense to add parking where it's needed. Also, as Casey said, by Biochem and the Biochem Addition, there's, it's been under construction, so there's not very convenient parking. For instance, it's along Babcock where it curves around there, and that's not very convenient for students. So once the construction is done, they should add parking where it is more convenient. Most importantly though, parking should be added along University that is street accessible, and this would stop illegal parking on the brown rails which go along University, which is a major problem. The City of Madison has several successful programs as far as innovating bike parking, and one of these is their parking on King Street. They have added on-street parking into car parking spots, and so now you can fit up to 10 bike spots per car spot that has been removed. And also, to make things easier, they can be removed in the winter for snow removal. And I'm going to hand it back over to Casey.
Alright, so there are some consequences for redesign. A few of the issues that we saw is that some people might get frustrated with just trying to use a single system. And one of the things we have to consider is how we accommodate those issues. Would we just say, tough, deal with it, or would we try and find an actual solution? Another one is what happens if you have a specialized bike like a bicycle cab or a recumbent bike. How do you lock into a bike rack like this if it's not quite capable? A third issue is that if you're adding more parking, what do you do? Where do you find that space? Are you taking away from other stuff like gardens or sidewalks? You have to make sure that the space you're taking away, if it's important, you're moving it somewhere else where it can still be used. And finally, if we do add parking, we need to make sure that it's still street accessible and readily able to use. So we're just going to quickly wrap this up.
So we've discussed many issues with bicycle parking on campus. And while the system is imperfect, riders need to take responsibility for their parking so that the system can be used as it was intended. We also proposed that the university choose one system as our revised duckbill system, and going forward to make parking much easier.
And with that, we've tried to address a lot of the issues with bicycle parking on campus, and we would like to just see that those issues be resolved. However, we know that we haven't addressed all the issues, so with that, we'd like to open up our Q&A with any issues you might see, and how you'd like to see those addressed as well. Yes?
So why do you think it's important to standardize the bike racks? I mean, what's the advantage of standardization versus buying, say, two different systems?
It really helps everyone have a clue of how to park their bike in a community, because a lot of parking areas, they're all together, and when people don't have an idea of how to work around with other bikers and how to park their bike properly, it wastes a lot of time, a lot of energy, and makes people pretty frustrated, especially when they're such a driven community of trying to just get from one place to another. It just saves a lot of frustration.
Do you think, how important do you think aesthetics are in terms of bike racks? Because I think with the U-shaped one, that's kind of where they're going with that. I know outside of engineering, the spectral ones are good, but like say outside of the Discovery Center, where aesthetics are a little bit more important, how do you think that plays a role in like their decision making?
I think that can play a huge role. I think a lot of it, I think, if we could dress this up and make it like an all black, we could obviously paint it very well.
Yeah.
However, I know also talking with the coordinators that they said the UW is going to be trying out a few other systems just to see how they go. And I think, yeah, we definitely do have to pay attention to aesthetics, because this is a community and we want to make our place look, or our campus look really good.
You mentioned extra enforcement as far as illegally parked bikes. Where do you think the funding for that would come from?
That's actually a very good question. I think that with the enforcement of the bicycles, we could probably pay for itself, especially if we're issuing fines. While it may be hard, and I'm not sure exactly what the payback on those fines would be as far as paying, I don't think it would cost too much to maybe have another few hours per officer, just, okay, instead of allocate your time towards this or something else. Any other questions?
Okay, thank you.